Hello everyone, welcome to the Glopo class. Today we are going to study UDHR. So let's get started with this unit. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is prescribed content in global politics. You must be familiar with its articles. To do this, you will read the entirety of UDHR. You can easily find it on the internet. While reading, you may want to consider the following questions. What are your first thoughts on reading the declaration? Do you think it is an important document? Are there any rights you feel should not be included or included? Just think over it. When you are thinking, let me start with UDHR's basic principles. It was adopted by General Assembly on 10 December 1948, which is also known as Human Rights Day. In 1966, two international covenants means agreements were adopted and codified. International Covenant on Civil and Political Right, that was the first one, and the second one was on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So these were the two covenants. Universal Declaration along with the two covenants and the protocols comprise the International Bill of Human Rights. So that means there is Universal Declaration, there are two covenants and the protocols. Together it is called as International Bill of Human Rights. These documents have laid down the foundation from which other treaties and declaration have been adopted. So that means it was not a futile one, but it was very useful where the other treaties and the declaration were adopted. Although the declaration is not legally binding, so that means that there is no legal enforcement, but still these rights are enshrined in many countries constitution and national laws. So this is like a pillar or the base or the foundation for the other countries to refer to this document. UDHR contains 30 articles. In that, 21 articles are of civil and political rights and 6 articles are of economic, social, cultural rights. Okay, so now what are those rights? So civil and political right. Article 2 to 21 deal with civil and political rights such as right to life, liberty and security of person. That's from Article 3. Prohibition against torture, inhuman or degrading treatment. That's Article 5. Equality before law and equal protection of law without discrimination. That's Article 7. Right to freedom of movement and residence, Article 13. Right to nationality, Article 13, etc. So these rights are called as civil and political right. Apart this one, as I said, that 6 rights are from economic and social right. So these rights are from Article 22 to 27, such as social security, right to work, rest and leisure, education, participate in cultural life. I hope this one is clear. So majorly you will see that these articles are divided either in civil and political rights or socio-cultural economic rights. Apart these rights, there is Article 29, which does not talk about any right, but it talks about duty. Duty of what? Duty, everyone has duty to the community. So that means UDHR is just not talking about right, but there is an article which is talking about duties as well. This UDHR was merely a recommendation. It was not strictly binding on the states. As I said earlier, that there was no legal enforcement, as this was just a recommendation. All right, this was just proposed. This is how United Nations should set its goal. Peace, security, and these human rights are also the fundamental base of United Nations. UDHR as customary international law. What is customary international law? So here is the definition of that. Customary international law consists of rules that come from a general practice accepted as law. General practice which is accepted as law eventually. So just think of any customary law from your country where it was considered a custom years back, decades back, and then eventually it turned into a law and exist independent of treaty law. So treaty means where there are agreement between the two parties or many more parties. Customary law is of crucial importance in today's armed conflict because it fills gaps left by treaty law and so strengthens the protection offered to victims. So that means wherever there is no treaty law, their customary law would be utilized. I hope this one is understood what is customary law, which has been practiced over a period of time as a custom and eventually it becomes law. So UDHR has been used as a customary international law. What is that? Let's read it further. Declaration has cited so many times both within and outside the United Nations. So that means that this declaration has been referred on and off and within outside of United Nations. Because of its general acceptance and common legal opinion, some of the provisions have grown into customary law of nations and therefore binding on all states. So that means when a country is accepting this one, they become eventually binding law. Tehran Declaration in 1968 observed that UDHR constitutes an obligation for the member of international community, although there was no elaboration of precise nature of obligation. This is something where you can cite it in the paper also when you happen to talk about the advantages of UDHR, where the Tehran Declaration is also appreciating that how despite of not binding, it can be useful for the countries. It is generally considered to have the weight of customary international law because it is widely accepted and used as a yardstick for measuring the conduct of states. Some provisions of declaration do reflect customary international law as follows. So what are those customary international law? Right to equality, prohibition against slavery, against torture, against arbitrary arrest, and right to privacy. These are some of the rights which are written over here and which have been considered as customary law. What are the challenges to these UDHR? Universal declaration, as this is considered, but there are clashes with different cultures, which is known as relative culture, where these cultures they do not abide themselves to these universal laws. So universal, there is one question also which I happen to ask in my class. Do you think that there is there is any word called universal which can be applicable to everyone? Think over it, okay? Not legally binding, as I have been talking about, that the major flaw, the challenge to this UDHR is that these are not legally binding. Right to digital privacy and right to access internet, these are called modern digital rights. So does it talk about? Think over it. Other rights like LGBTQ rights, does it talk about that? Climate change? No. So think that what in case if UDHR is written in this decade instead of written in 1948, what rights could have been added there? So these were some of the features of these UDHR, where we spoke about the strength and the challenges. Strength in the sense of that how even till now the countries have been using these customary law, and these have been the foundational reference for NGOs as well. I hope this video was informative for you. See you in the next class with human rights, treaties, and the laws.